All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session on the new way of selling. So, look, we're a small group, so let's have some interaction. Don't all be strangers, because the more you put in, the more you'll get out. So, let's just set a bit of a frame around this morning. Unless you're actually speaking, could you just mute yourself to avoid any background noise? Um, and let's get into it. So the topic today is the new way of selling. And look, all of us here are business owners, except Di, who's a professional salesperson. But our focus today is on client acquisition, because no matter how good you are at delivery, nothing happens if you can't profitably sell your products and services. So take out a piece of paper and just write down, just for yourselves, how much money you're making today out of your business and how much you want to make in 12 months from now, because that'll just set a little bit of a framework for the rest of today. Because unless you have some idea of where you want to get to, this is just an academic exercise, and you can sit here for the next 60 minutes and listen to me, but unless you actually do something with the information, nothing is likely to change. And so one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, okay, from where you are now to where you want to get to, how many clients do you need to convert, and at what price, as in how much revenue do you need to bring in? And the other more important question actually is, what is the profit margin on those clients? And what is the lifetime value that they're going to stay with you? So with that in mind, over the next 60 minutes, we're going to go over the major shifts in selling as I see them today, and what you now need to do to become a masterful salesperson. And it's really more about how you change your mindset from pushing something down somebody's throat to finding out what it is their problems are and how you can serve them more effectively. And the whole intent is to help you accelerate your results. Now, I'm going to provide a replay. So rather than scramble and take screenshots and notes, what I'd prefer you did is to actually write down any insights that you have, things that you can take away and start to implement from tomorrow or even today that will help you reach your sales goal. Cool? Just give me a thumbs up. Good, thank you. I like interaction. Put stuff in the chat as well. So over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a major shift in sales. And we've moved away from what we would consider the traditional approach where you follow the linear sales process. You know, if you've ever been involved in any sort of direct marketing, especially internet direct marketing, you would know this whole thing about long sales funnels. You know, people come in the top and they sort of keep going down all these levels until they sort of hopefully spit out as a customer down the bottom of the funnel. And you know that maybe if you talk to 1,000 people, maybe 10 of them will become clients, but they have to go through this progression. That, to a large extent, has changed. Today, buyers mainly do a lot of their own research and are looking for solutions. And it's not about a linear process anymore. Today, it's more about omnipresence. So you've got to be everywhere that somebody might see you, so that when they're ready to do something, they know that you exist, they know the problems that you solve, they have some inkling of what they're looking for, and they reach out and want to start a conversation. Now, that's only a small percentage of the market, mind you. So we're going to talk about the other larger percentage of the market that could have a problem, but they're not necessarily looking at this point and they don't even know you exist. So we'll get to that. But when you are talking to a prospect, prospects expect you to have conversations around why they need to change and the positive impact of doing so, the impact of not changing and the impact of changing. And the other fundamental, and this has never really changed, is you can't control when someone will make a decision to buy. If you have ever worked in the corporate space, you would know that there's this huge emphasis on quarters or end of year, and the fact that end of quarter is coming up, and you would ring all your prospective clients and you'd say, I need to get this deal over the line. It's it's the 29th of June, it's end of year coming up, or it's the end of the quarter, and you pressure people into buying, and no one likes being pressured. And yes, some people would sign the check and sign the deal, but I can guarantee that that is not a good way to keep a long-term client, because anybody who feels pressured is not going to come back to you. I mean, would you come back to anybody who you felt pressured? You wouldn't, would you? So the whole emphasis on the new way of selling is to sow a lot of seeds and then basically nurture, water, grow them into fertile plants as the analogy. And then when the plant is ready to be harvested, they will come on and want to become clients. And to do that, you need to build a system to attract, engage, convert, and even more importantly, retain good quality clients. Because what people forget is that it costs maybe 7, maybe 10, maybe 15 times more to get a client in the door in the first place, because you've got to build up that level of trust, you've got to build up that level of familiarity before somebody becomes a client. And therefore, it's much easier to keep that client for the long term and keep looking at how else you can serve them, because you've already got that foot in the door. And this is the biggest mistake that we see with a lot of, especially consulting companies. They have this attitude where, oh, I've got the client and I've put the consultant in, or I'm the consultant, and I don't have to do anything while I'm in the client to actually broaden out the scope of the engagement by just keeping my eyes and ears open to see what might be available, what might be happening over there, what's that conversation going over there in the other corner. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. Most of you know who we are, but if someone's watching the replay, I'll do that for the benefit of the replay. So I have a background in engineering, and I've been working with major IT companies for the last 20 years in technical, sales, and senior management capacities before Barbara and I started Revealed Resources in 2000. So over the last 22 years, we worked with business owners to help them build a business by design. A business that works for you, not you for the business. And to accomplish this, we help our clients establish frameworks so that the business flourishes and they create wealth for themselves. Now, just as a quick aside, there are two ways you create wealth in business. One is you create wealth as you go along, because you have a business that actually is profitable, makes money. You take that money out of the business, and you invest it in other assets which compound financially. And the other way, which is the traditional approach, is to build a business that you can sell. And you hope that you're going to sell it for a reasonably large figure at the end of whatever the life cycle is of the business. And that's the classic entrepreneur's journey. Now, the caveat that I always talk about with people is that that classic entrepreneur's journey basically applies to maybe 4% of businesses. Statistically, it's about 4% of businesses actually get sold for any amount of decent money. Most businesses simply get shut down. So when we're working with clients, our whole thing is sell and deliver as much as possible as you go along on the journey. And then if at the end of this journey you have systemized your business along the way, and the business basically runs without you so that you're beyond the business, then somebody would possibly come along and buy it because it is a saleable entity. But in the meantime, sell as much as you can, deliver as much as you can, so that you keep making money and slotting it aside. So if we look at, go back here. There are three fundamental principles underlying every business. To be viable, you have to solve problems that people are willing to pay for. And you could say that the only reason for being in business is to get a customer and keep them. So therefore, you must be able to find people and convert them into customers. So when we're working with clients, the triangle that you can see there forms the fundamental basis of everything that we do, because it's the fundamental basis of why you actually exist as a business. So if we look at the left-hand side, we start with problems and outcomes. What do you actually do? Because everybody has problems, and everybody is looking for outcomes, but not everybody is willing to pay for solving those particular problems and outcomes. So what are the problems that you solve for your specific clients? And narrow that down, because one of the biggest issues we have on the right hand side is who is the market that you're actually attracting. And we'll get into a little bit more depth on the problems and outcomes of the market in a minute. But if we look at a market, there are two types of people in a market. There's a demographic and there's a psychographic. And a demographic is anything that is physically found. So, size, location, industry, number of people, etc., etc., etc. The psychographic, in my opinion, is actually more important, because the psychographic talks about the values and beliefs that the people that you're dealing with would actually have. Are they interested in growth, for instance, if you're in that field? Are they interested? What are the values and beliefs that would have them want to work with someone like you? And the biggest mistake that we've seen over the years is having too broad a market, because it's like being a jack of all trades. You can be a master of none. So if your market is too broad, it is very difficult to actually target a specific person in a market. Unless, we don't have Coca-Cola's budget. We can't target everyone in the world. We're not like McDonald's, who can target a whole swathe of people. Our focus has to be on a relatively narrow group of people that, if they resonated with the message that we put out, would raise their hands and say, yes, I'm interested. And the biggest piece of advice I would give is a bad message or a mediocre message to a highly relevant market will do far better than a great message to a market that isn't interested. And a simple analogy would be, if you were opening a vegetarian restaurant, or actually I'll do it another way. If you were opening a steakhouse in a hippie commune, which was purely a vegetarian commune, you wouldn't get very far. So you need to understand the market, and the relevance to your market is far more important than the message itself. So your message might not be completely on track, but it will still resonate with somebody who is in your market. And at the bottom of the pyramid is traffic and conversion. Because you can have a great message, you can have a great market, you can narrow it down exactly to who they are, but if you cannot get your message in front of them, economically, this isn't going to work. So when we talk about economics, it's the lifetime. You work it out of the lifetime value of your clients. If your lifetime, if for instance, let's say your first purchase is, say, $5,000, and over the lifetime they spend $20,000, well, theoretically, you could spend $20,000 to get a client in the door and break even. Theoretically, of course, no one's ever going to do that. But you would have to say, okay, how much can I afford to spend to acquire that client, knowing what the return on investment is going to be from that average client? And that gives you a very good idea of how much money you can put in to either advertising or networking or whatever form of acquisition activity that you take. And remember, people say, oh, look, I'm not going to advertise, I'm just going to network. But networking costs you money, just like anything else, because you're going out there, you're spending time, you're spending your time, which equates to a number of dollars. You're having lots of conversations. There may be the fees for the networking, etc., etc. So what is this actually going to cost you to get in a client? And then what is your conversion rate? Because if you see, let's say you make 100 approaches. Out of those 100 approaches, you divide it by 4, so that's about 25 meetings. You divide that by 4, which are average numbers, which is about 5 clients. If you can get that conversion rate from 5 to 6 to 7, that puts your ROI up significantly, because you're doing the same amount of work, but you're getting a better result. And that's the whole basis of the traffic and conversion component. So you really need to know what your problems and outcomes are. You need to know who they are, who you're targeting, and you need to know how you're going to get the traffic and how you're going to convert. And today is all about conversion. So this is a model that my mate Steve Brosman came up with. I give him full attribution because that's what we do. And I really like the model, so I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to add a little bit to it. So our job in sales is to encourage prospects to take action and buy. But people generally avoid change, and status quo is your biggest enemy. So whenever you're sitting in front of somebody, you've got to say, okay, what is the particular problem this person is likely to be having? And what is likely to want them to take action to fix it? So there are the problems, there's a pain on the left-hand side, and there's the gain on the right-hand side. And we all move away from problems wanting some aspiration. And every problem that somebody is willing to pay money, and this is the caveat, pay money to solve, has to have some form of logical impact of them not solving it. And that logical impact has to lead to some form of emotional impact of not solving it. Because we all buy on emotion, and then we justify our decisions with logic. And I don't care whether it is the CEO of a large organization or somebody just one of us just buying something that we really want, which we then look at how we can justify the purchase either to ourselves, to somebody else, maybe a spouse, maybe a family member, maybe a boss, maybe the friends that you've got. But you can't leave people in the problem, because some people are more motivated by moving away from the pain, and 50% are motivated by moving into the gain. But if you leave people in problems, then they tend to be paralyzed. So you've also got to figure out on the other side of the swing, what do they want instead of the problem? So what is the gain that they want? What's the logical result of getting that? And what is the emotional result of getting that? And the greater the swing between the pain and the gain, the more likely they are to take action. Now, all of us tend to have a preference as to where we sit on that pendulum by default. Some of us tend to be more moving away from the pain oriented. Some of us tend to be more moving towards the gain orientation. But you have to realize that we are not our clients and we are not our prospects. So where does your prospect sit? And you need to move people from the pain to the gain, but pain motivates more than gain. And I'll give you an example. So very long time ago, I used to be in Amway, and I'm sure all of us with a certain vintage have probably been in Amway or come across Amway. Just give me a thumbs up if you know what I'm talking about. Yep. So Amway's big spiel was you could have this wonderful lifestyle, within 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years, you could be sitting on the beach, you could be with all these wonderful people, and they had all the glossy brochures, the material, the videos, the whole kit and caboodle. And you could be making this reasonably large amount of money in those days. And all you had to do was bring people into the network. And people would be really enthusiastic about this until they realized that they actually had to pick up the phone and call people and invite them to have a business meeting so that you could show them the plan and show them what they could get. And that's when things would fall apart, because you can imagine what would happen. You'd pick up the phone and you would, back in the day, you would ring somebody and you'd say, I'd like to invite you to a business meeting. And they would go, is it Amway? And you'd go, yes. Next thing would be click. Next person you pick up the phone, you ring them. And by the way, these are your family and friends. You start there. You ring them and they go, is it Amway? And you go, click. I tell you what, after the third or fourth person, you stop picking up the phone, because the pain of taking action was far greater than the gain of the emotional and the emotional impact of actually having this lifestyle. The lifestyle was too far away. The pain was immediate. So it's really important when you're dealing with people, no matter who they are, to balance out the pain and the gain, and also look at what is the status quo. Because if the status quo is preferable to taking action, because the pain of taking action is actually greater than the status quo, and the effort that they'd have to put in, they won't take action. And realize that we're all motivated by some combination of 6 different things. And those are money, time, status, well-being, capability, and energy. So if we look at money, it's either we're motivated by not having enough money and we need to move something, or we're motivated by having more money and we need the money. That is what's going to get us to do something. Time, it could be saving time or having the time to do something else. Status is a really important motivator, especially in a corporate world, because when you're dealing in an organization, one of the things that your buyer is thinking about is this going to help me or hinder me in my position in this company? If I put this thing through, is there a risk that I could lose my job if it doesn't work out? On the other side, is there a reward if this thing really works and I get a promotion, I get my bonus, etc.? But most often, people are more afraid of the risk of what's going to go wrong, and that's why they would kybosh the deal. And it's something to be really aware of, which we'll get to in a minute. Well-being is, does this thing improve my lifestyle, my satisfaction, my life, how I go about doing things? Or is this going to be more work and therefore I'm not going to do it? And this is very prevalent. For instance, if you were putting an IT solution into an organization and the business agrees that, yes, this is a really good thing we want to do, and the IT department is going, yeah, I'm not sure that I want to put in the work to do this. Or the IT department is going on a status level, if we do this, this wasn't invented here, we should be doing this. Why should we use somebody else to do this? And therefore, they would kybosh the deal. Capability. Do we have the capability to actually do this? You're asking us to make some change, and all change is hard. So do we have the capability and the resources to actually put in what it is that you're suggesting? And then energy. Does this whole thing give me energy, or is it take away? Is it just a drag? Okay. So you need to know for each particular person and each particular situation what those levels of motivation could be, or what could actually hinder you. Anyone want to comment into that? And just unmute yourselves.
It all makes perfect sense then. Thanks, Richard.
Phil, you've been around a long time. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I agree. But look, I've heard this kind of story before, Rashid. The problem with being around a long time, there's not many stories I haven't heard. But it doesn't detract from the fact that it's not important, and it's good to hear it again, because they're real issues out in the real world. I mean, my clients are now get more complicated when you get to large corporates, because, as you know, there's more people in the stream, and more people that can unhinge and stop the problem. You know, you can go halfway through the organisation, and then it's someone else down the line that can sometimes kybosh the whole deal. So it's a more complex market, but look, the things are still the same in the sense that people and all corporations still want to do things based on emotion first, and then they justify it afterwards. And the simpler you can make the process, the better. I try and do a one-stop shop arrangement where they don't have to think about anything in a complex arrangement. So all the complexities are taken away. Because it's a complex market for me, the sky sign market, there's plenty of mistakes you can make. So I'm trying to minimize the risk for middle management, I suppose, so that, and that's what they want too. I think a lot of the problems with middle management, it's more the fear of making the wrong mistake that will come back to bite them and they may lose their job. So it's really about mitigating risk for them so that it makes it easier for them to make a decision.
Yeah, and eliminating risk is one of the biggest issues that we all have when we're dealing with larger deals, because we're all going, what if this doesn't work? But then what if it did?
Yeah.
But people don't think like that. They're thinking, always remember that people are thinking of what's in it for me. What's my risk? And the thing to realize with any organization is the smaller the organization. So for us as business owners, what's good for us is good for the business. But the bigger the organization, the greater the disparity of what's good for the individual and what's good for the business. So something might be really good for the business, but the individual is going, oh, actually, this is a bit risky for me, or this, I could lose my job, or this is going to create more work for me, and therefore they kybosh the sale. So if we look at this, yeah.
Sorry, Alex has put up his hand.
Sure.
And Diana has just dropped the chat, something into the chat box before we go there. May want to clarify. Sorry.
That's all right. All right, Alex. You
yeah. Well, look, I just put it in, but how generic is this? Is there a bias for different things that you're selling with different people? For example, if you're trying to sell, cutting edge, new theory, innovative tech put into an app, say, versus trying to sell a new car. My issue is that I'm bringing something new to market. It has huge values in an abstract sense, probably tipping on a number of those motivation points. Does your theory of 6, is it pretty balanced for everybody, or does it change a lot?
No, it will be unique for every individual, and the skill is to be able to nut out for this particular individual, and that might be talking to the individual and listening to what they say, but it could also be talking to people around them, or maybe there's somebody external that give you an idea. Okay, so I heard this particular story donkeys years ago, and but it's pertinent. So there was a facilities management company that would go into organizations and say, look, you can outsource all your facilities management to us, and ostensibly it's a very, very good deal. And this particular organization, they found that the local New South Wales facilities manager was blocking the deal. Now you can think, pretty obvious why when you think about it. This guy is thinking, okay, if this company comes in over the top, I'm going to lose my job. So there's a major risk to me, my lifestyle, my status, my well-being, my money. There are all of these risks. So what the company did, the vendor did, was they found out on the grapevine that this was the situation. I mean, it should have been reasonably obvious, but they found out on the grapevine that this was the situation. So they went to this guy and they said, hey, listen, Fred, we're expanding our operation in New South Wales, and we would like you to become our facilities manager in our organization and look after all of these different facilities. And guess what? He okayed the deal, went over, and started working for the other people. Well, at least he didn't kybosh the deal. Let's put it that way. So, but coming back to your specific case, because I know what you do. Selling a car is a lot easier on some level than selling a service, because selling a car, it's tangible. Your customer knows what they're getting. They have specific criteria that they're looking for. Very often they could be quite emotional. I know people who bought cars, believe it or not, because there were 2 wine glass holders for the bottles in the back seat that would fall down. That was the reason they bought the car. Somebody else I know bought a car because it had a roof that came up and down as a convertible automatically. Okay. Other people, engineers, for instance, would go very logical and say, look, I want to know all the nuts and bolts of the specifics. So those things are tangible. But when you're talking about a service is not tangible, and they don't know what they're getting until they've got it. So you have to have some way of linking what it is that you do to something that they already know about. So the best way to explain a new concept is to link it to an existing concept, because people then have a framework for what this thing is about. So in your case, if it's resource management, you say, okay, well, okay, what are all the ways that you actually do resource management right now? And you go through all of the ways that people do it, and you unpack the issues that they have with that resource management. And then you say, okay, so we've got this over here on the left-hand side. And if you, let's just say you do 3 columns, and you do a left-hand side column, these are all the issues you have, and a right-hand column which says all of the things that you actually would want to have. And the middle column is how we bridge between the left-hand column and the right-hand column. And these are the things we do. Now, and you could be open and say, look, we can't solve every problem, but these are the things we do, and why don't we just start small? Because nobody is going, or nobody in their right minds is going to go holus bolus and spend a huge amount of money on something that they think is unproven. So one of the things is to say, okay, what is the thin slice? Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks. Yeah.
And Di, I think you had a question as well, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go on.
No, I was just interested in Phil's, I think it was Phil, in regards to, you said you go in with a view of having a holistic risk mitigation one-stop shop. Where and how are you, putting that together in the first instance to be able to then take that to your clients?
Are you talking to me now?
Yeah.
Look, I just have a fairly simple one-line cure-all to say it's like a one-stop shop. So they or something like that. Make it simple so they don't know of all the problems along the line, and I don't share all those problems with them unless we get deeper into once we get into it, because I'd like to keep everything very simple. But I also want to make sure that the middle management I'm talking to, before it goes to the CEO or the marketing manager, well, it might start with the marketing manager, but I'm going to make it, so I spell out at the beginning that they sign one bit of paper and everything else gets solved. The manufacturing, the council approvals, how it's manufactured, everything, in fact, so that it makes it easier for them to make a decision. There's only one decision to make, and not, not coming back to them later with other problems and things we have to solve. So I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Okay. But is that at the beginning, or is that at the end of hours of consultation and meetings and giving them and building up that confidence and trusted advisor type of methodology up front to warrant a one-pager signed?
Yeah, I start with a very simple arrangement at the beginning, so it's easy to get in the door. I don't bring up too many complexities unless I can see that we're heading into a problem, and then I start to raise it. So I don't bring up. Look, I've been around for so long, I see 100 problems all the time. I don't bring them up because I think it only alarms them.
Yeah, you don't want to confuse people.
I've got the solutions anyhow. So I try and keep it simple. And so that might mean at the end of halfway through the process, we get involved in some of the dilemmas and how to solve them. So I try and keep it simple for them all the way through. And I solve the problems. I don't have to let them know unless there's something I have to bring them into my confidence as to where the issues are, where we've got problems with production or council or something else.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
All right. So
I guess I'm like you, trying to avoid getting into that. The common denominator these days is, tell me your issues and your problems and we'll solve them. I'm trying to pivot that around 360 to say, where do you need to be in the next 3, 6, 12 months? And what would be some of your roadblocks to achieve those timeframes or those milestone timeframes?
Okay, let me add something here. Okay, so in the old days, we would have possibly gone in and said, what's the biggest issue that you solve today would give you the greatest return on any time, money, and effort that you put in, and you shut up and they say, oh, blah, 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 blah. The problem with that is that could be anything. It may not be
Yeah,
anything that
definitely.
you can solve. So I would always go into a client or a potential client knowing something more than just a superficial what their business is, what they're likely to be facing, and say, okay, when we work with people like you, we notice that they have problem A, B, and C. Are any of those sort of problems on your radar? Are they causing you any form of grief? And this is the sort of thing that we help them solve, which puts a frame around it and helps contain the issue, because you don't want this to be a free-for-all. You want to be able to contain the issue, then you want to be able to explore the issue. You might diverge a little bit, but then you need to converge back again so that you actually get to a next step of actually taking them down the path of, okay, we've agreed that this is the issue. We've agreed that there is an impact of not solving it. We've agreed of what the impact is of solving it, both logical and emotional. And what is the next step? Now, if we look at this model over here, just about all our sales are going to involve more than one stakeholder in some form. Okay, even if you were dealing with a family, you've got family members who are probably going to be involved in the decision. But in all of our cases where we deal with organizations, there are going to be multiple people involved in the decision. And the biggest mistake is not realizing all of the various people who could be involved and getting your message in front of them. So if we look at the model, basically the first thing you need to do is to network and figure out who could be involved in the decision. And that is both influencers and who gives the final approval, and more equally importantly, who could kybosh the sale. And there are a couple of ways we do this, because one of the things you've got to realize is that every organization, if it's a largish organization, mid to large, okay, as in more than 5 or 6 people, they will have a formal org chart and they will have an informal org chart. So there's an official network and there's an unofficial network. And most of the time, it's the unofficial one that drives the company. And you need to know, or you need to figure out, or ask people that might know. And this is where there might be someone external that could help you because they know the people involved, as to who are the decision makers, where the real power base is. It's like that old thing with the Japanese, where Americans were very famous for this. They went into Japan and they would have these meetings with a group of people from the Japanese side, and there'd be one person in the corner who was very quiet, said nothing. There'd be somebody else who was the so-called front man, and usually was a man. And the focus would be on this particular person, rather than realizing that it was the quiet one in the corner who actually made the decision. The other big mistake we make is when you're actually navigating, so you network your way around the company. You navigate and you look for all of the various players and you figure out what is in their best interest personally, as well as for the business, of okaying the deal. And a huge mistake is not involving, if it's any sort of technology, not involving IT and not involving the users. So we had someone on one of our sales intensives, and his company sold a SaaS product for marketing procurement. So the companies that bought his product would use the product to get better deals out of their vendors. And the business said this is a fantastic idea, and they would go in and put the product in. But 3 months later, they'd say, hang on, no one's using the product. And they basically kill the deal. And the reason was nobody actually got buy-in from the users who had been using their own methodology for the last God knows how many years, to change and actually realize why they should make the change and why they should use this particular product. And if you've been around any length of time, history in this country is littered with examples of that, where millions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars in large deals were spent and never used because the users never actually used the product. And we can't afford that because our reputations are on the line. So when you're navigating through the organization, you've got to figure out what each person's time, money, status, well-being, energy, capability is, and whether they're likely to want to okay this deal or could they kybosh it. And then find the people who could actually make the decision to buy. The other mistake that we see very often is people, okay, so in the old days, I'll put it this way. In the old days, you never got fired for buying IBM. And there was this whole thing about, you came in at the top and you spoke to the board and you spoke to the CEO, and the CEO would just filter this decision all the way down the line. It doesn't work like that anymore, okay? Today, there are all sorts of people all over the place in the organization that could have a bearing on this deal. And sometimes it's useful to come in lower down and push it up. Sometimes it's useful to come in further up and push it down. But you've got to be able to have the wherewithal to do both and figure out who's who in the zoo, because then you've got to be able to negotiate with each one of them and figure out what's going on for them. And between network and negotiate, you see compassion. And compassion is actually doing an empathy map. And there's a whole process for doing empathy maps where you sit down and you think, okay, if you put yourself in this person's position, what would they be seeing, feeling, hearing, talking about on a day-to-day basis? What are their concerns? What are they looking for? And by putting yourself in their position, you have a far greater empathy for what they're what problems that they're trying to solve. And then you can talk about those particular problems and say, look, are you facing any of these sorts of issues? Okay? The trap, though, is not to get caught up in empathy. This is the thing. You've got to realize that rapport is pace, 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 lead. Okay? So if you just get caught up in their problems and you get caught up in whatever it is that they're talking about, you've got to show them a pathway out of that and say, okay, look, we've talked about all of these particular problems. We've talked about what you want. Let's make something happen here. And the negotiate comes down to one of three things that you need to push for in any meeting. You need to push for a contact, somebody else that you need to talk to that could be involved in the deal. Now, one of the things that people do is they say, well, who else is involved in this? And a lot of people will then turn around and say, well, no one is involved in this. I'm the sole decision maker. And that's a lot of crap. Okay? You know it and I know it. So you can't necessarily ask them in that particular form. What I would suggest you ask them is, who would get really upset if they weren't consulted about this? And they're more likely to tell you, oh, okay, so is it possible that we could talk to them together? Or, if you happen to be on their premises, you could say, look, I'm here, can you pick up the phone and see if they're available and we can have a quick chat? So it's really important to figure out who else is involved. A good example of where this can go wrong, or where it has gone wrong, because somebody hasn't involved other people, is we had a client and they did major refurbishments for hospitals and other organizations along those lines. And they had a very good reputation with this particular client. The client had used them to do a number of different refurbishments, and we're talking $5, $6, $10 million for refurbishment. And they had a tender from another location from this client. And I said to them, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so who is on the selection panel? And they said, well, three of the people we know really well. The fourth person is the local accountant. We don't know this person. And I said, okay, be very careful. You need to go and you need to talk to that accountant and you need to lay out line by line everything that you put in the tender and what the value is in terms that this accountant will abide with. Because You've got a panel, all 4 of them have to agree. Even one person dissents and the deal gets lost. They didn't go and talk to this person. And sure enough, they lost a $5 million deal because of it. Even though everybody else in the organization really loved them, they thought they were really good, etc., etc. But the one person who mattered most in this particular case could kybosh the deal. So it's a really important thing to realize. And conviction, you've got to be absolutely certain that you are doing the best for your potential client. Because if you're not, walk away. Refer them on to somebody else. Because the first sale is always to yourself. You have to be convinced that this thing is something that is valuable to your client and at every level of the organization that you're talking to. So let's look at your market. There are really 2 broad categories in your market, okay? There are people who know that they have an issue, and there are people who don't, but they would be open to buying if they knew about the issue. And this is where the difference between marketing and prospecting comes in. Because at any particular time, maybe 3, maybe 5% of your market actually knows that they've got a problem. They know that they want a solution. And what do? We go online and we start searching, or we talk to our friends, we talk to our colleagues, and we say, okay, who could be out there that could possibly help? There's another 7% who is open to a conversation if you reached out to them. There are 30% who are aware that they have an issue. They're sort of stuck, but they don't know where to look, and therefore, they may see some content, they may see some white papers, they may see some videos that you might have produced, and they go, oh, okay, now I know what I should be looking for, and they come into your funnel. There's a 30% that are niggling, they're dissatisfied, and they don't even know why they're stuck. Okay, and the other 30% who simply aren't interested, so don't waste your time with them. The trap is not recognizing that there is 67% of your market, thereabouts, except for the last 30%, that basically could be interested on some level if they knew you existed. So if you think about going back, go back to your previous clients and say, okay, what is it that you did for your previous clients, and how could I maybe get more sales out of your previous clients because they already know you, like you, and trust you? Great example of this is a client that we're working with, and they do deployments for large organizations, so computer deployments. And those deployments very often would come around every 3 or 4 years. You've got a big project somewhere, and basically they would organize for all of the equipment to be there, etc. And they had a client, and we've got a really good testimonial from this client, so I'll mention who they are. It was the Human Rights Commission. And the Human Rights Commission had done a number of these deployments over the years, but they hadn't done anything for the last 4 or 5 years. And our client said, oh, look, we haven't spoken to this guy in a long time. And we had a slight niggling problem. Something didn't quite go right. And so we've been scared to talk to him. I said, really? Okay. As it happened, the client had a work anniversary, as in the Human Rights Commission chap had a work anniversary. And our client sent him a message saying, oh, great, congratulations on the work anniversary. Almost immediately came back a message, oh, great to hear from you, and thank you for that. Oh, by the way, we've just put out a tender for another deployment, and your name isn't even on it. We'd completely forgotten about you. Can you put in a response? They put in a response and they won the deal. And the interesting thing was that after I spoke to the Human Rights Commission chap, he said that he loved these guys so much that he would have spent his own money getting them in to do this work. And even then, he had forgotten about them. Which brings me to the 90-day rule. So the 90-day rule says that if you are not in contact with somebody in 90 days, every 90 days, on day 91, If somebody else comes along with an equivalent product or service that they are interested in, they will go with that new person. And the 90-day rule came from a lady called Wendy McCarthy, who wrote a great book on how to get as much business as you want in 90 days and keep it forever. She used to work for Thomas Cook International, Saki and Saki, and Intercon Hotels. And she said she found this time and time and time again. Day 91 came along, somebody would forget about you and they would go with a new person. So it doesn't matter how you keep in touch with them. I mean, our process is a combination of newsletters. They see us on LinkedIn. For a number of people, you would know, I pick up the phone and I talk to people. And very often, people might take a year, 2, 3 years before they become clients, but it is that constant contact in a non-intrusive way that when they're ready to buy, they say, yes, I'm ready to buy. Another great example is another client of ours who worked in the education system. So he basically helped school principals improve their student learning outcomes. And we put together a whole system for him where we warmed up his clients. Well, first of all, we actually rang a select group of his school principal clients and we said, okay, what is it that this guy really does for them? What is it that they really like? What is it that they really want him to do more of? And from that, we learned a couple of things. One is that he could actually have another couple of products. So we actually hived off a couple of his products and made them into new products. But the other big one was he ran a program for about a year, and these principals turned around and said, oh, okay, we actually need 3 years. And I said, are you willing to pay for that? So his program went from $20,000 to $60,000, just like that. And then by creating a white paper and sending it out to other principals, we warmed up that market so that when those principals were ready, and he happened to be at a particular school conference, one of the principals walked up to him and said, I've got all your material, I've seen what you do, and here's my check, I'm ready to start. So when we work with people, we have a comprehensive system where we work together to put a selling, marketing, and prospecting system into place. And marketing is there to basically warm up your clients and get your name in front of them so that that percentage of people who are in the market and looking for you find you, or even the percentage that have a problem, they don't quite know, they see, oh, okay, this could be a solution, find you, and they start a conversation with you. And your marketing basically has to encourage them by giving them, talking about the problems that they're facing, talking about the outcomes that they want, and showing them a pathway to getting there. Prospecting comes in when you're talking to all of the people who don't know and aren't necessarily looking. And if you look at statistics today, a very large number, maybe 55, 60% of senior executives actually want people to reach out to them. Believe it or not, by the phone. So cold calling is not dead. Executives want people to reach out with ideas, with insights, with new ways of doing things. And then once you start that conversation and you qualify them, you can then start a sales conversation. So marketing is all about attracting, nurturing, and engaging and nudging people along. Prospecting is actively reaching out and qualifying people, and it targets about 40% of your market. And then sales is basically having a conversation with that top 10% who are ready to have a sales conversation and then moving them down the funnel. Now, also realize that just because you've had a sales conversation does not mean that somebody is going to buy today. Some of our conversations have taken a year, some have taken 3 years. The longest was 10 years before when somebody came on our list and they became a client. Sometimes it's instant. I've had people turn up from LinkedIn. They say, oh, look, we saw some of your videos. We've seen your material. Can we have a conversation? And then it might take 2 or 3 conversations to get them to actually sign on the dotted line. So it is that combination that you really need to work on. So what is your combination, and how do you put your marketing, selling, and prospecting system into place? So let's just wrap up in the next couple of minutes and say we've spent just about an hour together. So just let me know, what are some of the insights, maybe 2 or 3 insights that you've taken away, and what are you going to do, stop doing, maybe start doing from tomorrow and do differently from now on? And what will be different if you do something different in 30, 60, 90 days to move forward towards your sales goal? Anyone want to just share?
Yes, I got the notes I took that you believe that there is a change. People need to be able to find you. They reach out to you instead of necessarily you reaching out to them. Is that a correct summary? The other thing was that, as a reminder, probably, because I think you've said this before, that you need to stay in touch with people every 90 days. Otherwise, they'll forget you, even if they love you. And the last one was that executives actually want you to reach out with new ideas. That really sounds good to me. It's just a matter of how you do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think the mistake we make is we all think that people are just going to flood to us, and that doesn't happen. I mean, it does happen, but it doesn't happen in the numbers that we need it to happen.
No, it's not applicable to me.
No, because you're going to have to go out and say, hey, listen, you do things in this particular way, and here is this other way of doing it, but it can't be so radically different. You've got to create a bridge between what they're doing now and what you want them to do, because if it's so radically different, they're not going to consider it. The risk is too great. So sometimes incremental change is necessary. We think, we all have smartphones. Well, guess what? Apple didn't create the smartphone. IBM did in 1993. But nobody bought it. Apple didn't create the mouse. Xerox did. So all of these things took time, but they were incremental changes. But what Apple did really well was it marketed itself. Okay, it made things look really simple. So in some respects, no matter what we do, we need to make things really simple for our clients so that they can understand them and understand the concepts behind them. Anyone else?
Hey Rashid, it's Brendan here.
Hi, Brendan.
How are you doing? Some great points. There was a lot of things. I really loved the pendulum, and what you said. Pain motivates more than gain, but people buy emotion and justify on logic. I really liked. Especially. We call it the sphere of influence within an organization is who you connected around the business, and it's remembering people. It's a lot of it is around their status. What's in it for me, and what's the risk of their job? And I do a lot with L&D and HR, which are very protective of their little corner of the business. So thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention at least one of our new programs. Alex, you've done part of this program where we basically drill down into value propositions, how to lead, frame sales conversations, how to deal with multiple stakeholders, how to build and maintain a solid pipeline of qualified prospects, objection handling, proposals, and we've now added virtual selling skills. You want to just kind of put you on the spot and say you've done one of the programs with us and what you got out of it?
Yeah, on the spot, but that's okay. I'm thinking back through. One of the initial exercises was to go through defining the market and the client, the value being sold, and articulate. So that it was a bit of homework in advance, but that then was a springboard and applied to many things. And from that, the idea of understanding the circumstance and finding the gap in their circumstances was the thing that, and how you can offer to fill that gap was the thing that resonated with me. It's a very brief summary over, 2.5 hours, I think it was 3 hours, which helped contextualize and give you the confidence that you're not making this up on your own, and a little bit of a roadmap through these processes and some thinking to do. But that some drop off, like the not staying in touch for 90 days. I'd forgotten about that. It slipped off my radar.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thanks, Alex. It's what I would say. And I speak from personal experience. Okay, it's very hard. It's very hard, or much harder, to define what it is you do for yourself. It's much easier if someone else comes along and says, okay, what is it you really do? And let's figure out what's happening for your clients, and let's figure out an empathy map, and let's figure out what the problems are, what they talk about openly, what they want to talk about, and put in place what the value proposition should be for this particular person. And then a value proposition overall for what you do, but then a value proposition for every person that could influence the deal. And then do that for each deal that you go in. So you have the overall that but then you sit down before you meet with any particular person, figure out what is the value proposition for that particular person. Because the closer you can get to that, the more likely it is that they're going to take action. So, any final comments?
Rashid, sorry, Diana had a second question, and I was wondering if you were, it was, what is it? Something along the lines of not appearing to be too know-it-all.
Okay, this is,
and
okay.
I think the dictate might create an interesting frame.
Okay, so the question about being too know-it-all. Okay, so I'll give you a personal example. All right. My last corporate job, I was being interviewed to be a senior executive in an organization, and the feedback that came from the hiring manager was people thought, because I'd had a number of different interviews with different people in the organization, and the feedback was that I was too glib. I was maybe a little bit too quick with the answers. Okay? And I thought, this is really interesting, because when you've heard, or when somebody has asked you the same question time and time and time again, and you're going, it's question number 7, it's question number 9, yeah, it's question number 15, blah, okay? You can come across as glib, overconfident, etc. So my thing is always, no matter what they ask, stop, count to 5, count to 10 internally in your head. So that's really interesting, as if you've never heard this before, and then give them an answer. But also, you can then drill down and ask yourself, okay, if they are asking a particular question, what is this question actually about? What is the content, and why would they be asking this? And what is a bigger frame for this question? What could the context be for this particular question to being asked? What's going on in their head? And then say, okay, so tell me more about that, or just drill down into it, so that you're not coming out with some set answer that you think that they, just because you've heard it any number of times. Diana, does that answer your question? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes.
Sorry, yes, trying to get the mute button.
Trying to get the mute button?
I'll stop. It's only Tuesday.
Okay.
I had a bad day.
Oh dear. All right. Anyway, look, let's just wrap that up. We've got a few minutes over time. So any final comments? Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
Just to say thanks very much again, Rashid. It's always good to get this and get the confidence and be reminded of a number of these points. I'm sure it's just a smidge of all the things that could be applied.
The thing is, thanks, Alex. The thing is, it's better to do something than nothing, and it's something that I have to keep reminding myself: progress, not perfection. So even if you do one thing that moves you forward, it's better than doing nothing because you're paralyzed because you've got so many things to do. So pick one thing that you can do and then just move it forward.
That's gold. That is gold, actually.
Yeah, thanks, Doug, because we all fall into this trap. Yeah, we've got all these different things. You know, what are we going to do? And then we do nothing. You know,
Yeah. Or
just
we're
make
waiting
one
for
connection.
someone else to do it.
Yeah, make one connection, one phone call, whatever. And you know, I was thinking back and asking and saying, okay, just about every one of our clients over the years has come because either I met them somewhere or it's been a phone call, sometimes a cold call, where I've just formed a relationship over time. Nothing happens in our sorts of businesses. Nothing happens until you talk to somebody. You know, ours is not the sort of business where people are going to spend large amounts of money on the basis of someone's messenger chat, no matter what anybody tells you.
Or
It's not
putting
gonna
us in
happen.
their shopping cart.
Sorry?
Putting us in their shopping cart.
Yeah, putting us in their shopping cart. Don't think it's going to happen.
No.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for that. And no doubt we will see you around.
Thank you.
Thanks.